Okay, we'll start with this per article from The Pugilist. No chance. American champ's brutal truth bomb for Tszyu, Australia's Tszyu, Yahoo Sport Australia. No chance. There's no chance of Charlo, this division's unified champion, could soon become this division's undisputed champion. There's no chance he goes down there to Australia to take up Tim and his promoters, no limit, up on their $10 million offer. In so many words, what Charlo parted is that Tim isn't yet ready. He's not yet at the level to where he should be fighting for a world title. And if he's being honest, he's not on the level to fight the guys that Charlo has fought and knocked out. Now, I will say this much. Maybe there is some truth to that.
That he's not ready to fight for a title?
I should say that he's not ready to win a title. Not from Charlo, I don't think. The same applies to Brian Castaño to a lesser extent. I don't know that Tim is ready for Brian because Brian's been in there with guys like Arislan Lara, gave a very solid account of himself in that fight. He went in there against Patrick Teixeira, the then reigning WBO junior middleweight champion, and he gave Patrick all he could handle. It wasn't a hard fight to score. That being said,
it's not a slight at Tszyu.
It's not a shot at him. It's just an observation that I think there's more work needs doing before Tim is not only ready to have those fights, but ready to win those fights. And with a professional record of 18 wins and no losses, I'm not sure that he's there yet, though he does exhibit a lot of promise. What I will say about Tim is that in terms of marquee value, he's a lot further along at 18-0 than either Charlo was when he was 18-0, or
and Brian Castaño is
here today at 17-0 as a reigning world champion. Comparatively, Tszyu is showing a lot of promise as far as ability, fighting ability, but moreover, he's showing a lot of marquee value. The kind of marquee value that Charlo didn't have when he was 18-0, when he was in that stage of his career, the stage that Tim is currently in. Jamel wasn't headlining his own cards, headlining pay-per-view shows, playing to crowds as high as 14, 15, 16,000. He wasn't.
No way.
He had nowhere near the kind of marquee value domestically that Tszyu has down there in Australia, in the land down under. And I said this before, I'll say it again, that's the saving grace for Tim, that even if he can't bring a world title fight to those Australian shores, because of his marquee value, he can still have interesting fights with interesting fighters, like Liam Smith, like Jesse Vargas.
Kell Brook.
Don't misunderstand me. It's a setback, it is. Not being able to bring a world title fight to Australian shores when you know you could do very good business with one, that's a setback. It's a problem. Moreover, it sounds like Charlo has no intention of ever fighting Tszyu at any point in Tim's career. And that's worrying. That's worrying in and of itself. But what saves Tim is that there are other fighters out there that have familiar names that he can keep busy with in the mean in-between time and not only continue to amass marquee value, but experience and ability as a fighter. Because if I'm being honest, I don't think he's ready for that Charlo fight anyway, or that Castaño fight.
Not here, not yet.
I think it's very gutsy of him to want those fights so soon at only 18-0. I think it's gutsy,
but ill-advised.
And this was always going to be the case at 154 pounds. This was always how it was going to work out because 154 pounds, much like 147 pounds, just so happens to be a PBC stronghold where the PBC controls most of the talent. Thus, anything short of Tszyu signing to the PBC in hopes that even if he don't get a Charlo fight, they can still position him for a world title?
At some point.
Anything short of that and it don't happen. And therein lies another dilemma.
What?
Why would Tim want to align himself with the PBC that primarily caters to an American audience when he's already got so much marquee value down there in Australia? I mean, it just doesn't make sense. None of their fighters at 18-0 had the kind of marquee value that Tim currently has at 18-0.
He's already headlining pay-per-views down there.
You're gonna abandon your core audience in the land down under. Leave all of that behind so that you can come up here and do what? Fight on FS1?
Is that it?
What, fight on Fox?
Try to appeal to Americans?
When you already have so many of your own countrymen behind you, when you're already a bona fide attraction, domestically, yeah, but still a bona fide pay-per-view attraction in your own home turf.
Right.
You're gonna leave all of that behind to enter into a partnership with the PBC so that you can play second fiddle to their American-based fighters? How much sense does that make?
Yeah, that's not gonna work.
And that's what I always thought was gonna happen. There are obstacles on Tim's path to a world title at 154 pounds. Tim may not see himself fighting for a world title of any kind at this weight because 154 and 147 pounds. Those are both PBC stronghold divisions where they control most of the talent. It's conceivable that some of those guys at 147, they'll try to move up to 154, keep those titles in-house and freeze out fighters like Tszyu. Tim, he might not see himself fighting for a world title until he moves up to 160 pounds, a much less political division than 154 pounds is. I'll tell you something. The case of Charlo, Tszyu, it more or less reeks of American prima donna-ism. I mean, I understand paying the cost to be the boss, the way that Charlo has, and the way that he still is in his upcoming fight with Brian Castano, which will be for the undisputed junior middleweight championship. I get it. It's just that traveling abroad didn't stop Josh Taylor from fighting Jose Ramirez this past weekend in what was Jose Ramirez's neck of the woods. I mean, it was more Jose's neck of the woods than it was Josh's. That didn't stop him.
Still got that passport out.
He still got on a plane. He still had a fight. In Josh's own words, he was facing more than just the man opposite the ring that night, Jose Ramirez. He was facing Kenny Bayless. He was facing a hostile crowd and some very partial judges. But in spite of all of this, he came through with the victory, didn't he?
Guess American fighters don't like their chances on foreign soil.
Kind of like how Teofimo Lopez is rejecting the idea of a Taylor fight in the United Kingdom, saying that fight would be somewhere over here. He was quoted as saying, "I can just see the amount of favoritism over there. That fight would be somewhere over here." Oh, favoritism over there, because there's no favoritism over here, right?
Right.
At the end of the day, I'm slowly becoming the cash cow of the division, insists Lopez. These guys can make a better paycheck fighting me where I choose, but I do eventually want to fight in the UK. It's something I want to do. Yeah, just not with Josh, I guess.
Right.
However, I'm not giving anyone the upper hand over me. I've done it before. The whole thing now is just playing my cards right and making those fights happen, though. So Lopez is not averse to fighting in the United Kingdom. That only applies to a Josh Taylor fight. When it's about Josh Taylor, he is averse to fighting in the United Kingdom. How does that work?
The double standard, that's how it works.
Teofimo is calling himself the cash cow of this division. That contention is neither proven nor earned. We won't know for sure what Teofimo is until after he has that George Kambosos Jr. fight, provided he wins it and we get a look at what that fight does in the open market. What kind of pay-per-view buys does it generate? They're talking about tickets ranging
Tickets to the fight.
anywhere from $150 to $10,000 for a ticket. $10,000. And you'll excuse me for saying so, but I'm not sure that kind of price tag is warranted to be in attendance. These are fighters that are not household names. Not even Teofimo Lopez himself. Not yet.
And he's the most recognizable fighter on the card.
If you're paying anywhere from $150 to $10,000 to be there, to be in attendance, it must be for the music act. It must be for the concert environment. Because any of these fighters, capable fighters, champions that they might be, some of them, they're not household names yet. These are fighters that are only really known in the hardest of hardcore circles of boxing. I mean, Michael Hunter against Mike Wilson. You got to pay anywhere between $150 to $10,000 to see that. Never mind that this is being billed as a pay-per-view. I take you back to old Bob's contention that, you know what? This fight between Teofimo and George, it's a good fight. Two solid fighters, two unbeaten guys. It's undisputed to some degree, or unified, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But it's not pay-per-view worthy. We're going to find out soon enough how much the paying public agrees or disagrees with Bob Arum's contention, because in order to see it, you're going to have to buy it. That is, unless you plan on stealing it. You plan on streaming it on some illegal website. We'll find out who was right and who was wrong. Short enough. Better still, Teofimo's calling himself the cash cow of the division already. That's neither proven nor earned.
Whether or not he can call himself that is based on how much cash he generates.
And for his sake, that pay-per-view better do well, because if it doesn't, it reflects poorly on him. So, young Teofimo Lopez does not want to board a plane, travel to the United Kingdom to take on Josh, the same way that Gary Russell Jr. didn't want to get on a plane to take on Josh. Not Josh Taylor, Josh Warrington. Back in February, He was made an offer by Matchroom, something to the tune of $1 million, to participate in a featherweight unification match with the then unbeaten IBF champion, Josh Warrington. This is before Josh relinquished the red belt. Gary turned it down, said it was beneath his standards. And what those standards are, nobody knows, because Gary hasn't had a fight since then, and he doesn't seem to have one scheduled either. Showtime released their schedule for their next upcoming fights. Gary ain't on it. Fox hasn't released one, not one of their own. So essentially, Gary Russell Jr. turned down $1 million payday to do absolutely nothing against absolutely no one. American prima donna-ism.
You ain't so hot to trot on foreign soil.
You'd rather earn nothing from February till now, not fight at all, than fight on foreign soil. That's how confident you are in your abilities.
It's a pattern.
But Josh Taylor, he can come over here, the unified titles with the then unbeaten Jose Ramirez. Very soon, this upcoming weekend, Chantel Cameron, reigning WBC super lightweight champion. She's going to be defending her title, not in her neck of the woods, but in Melissa Hernandez's neck of the woods, more or less. Melissa Hernandez is based out of America. That's where the fight's taking place. You don't see Chantel complaining, unless we forget the fight between Amandia Serrano and Katie Taylor falling apart because Amandia's people didn't like the money and didn't want to have a fight in Eddie Hearn's backyard. They'd rather not have the fight at all than have it there so they can go somewhere else and start asking for it again.
Good luck with that.
Ideally, regardless of nationalism, national pride, and personal preferences, a fight should take place where it stands to make the most money. If that's in the United Kingdom, so be it. If that's in the United States, the same applies. Here today, we don't know where a Lopez versus Taylor fight stands to make more money. Would that be here in America or over there in the United Kingdom? The conversation in and of itself is premature, though Teofimo expressing an aversion to it potentially taking place in the United Kingdom so soon in the conversation, well, that tells you what you need to know, doesn't it?
What if it's a bigger fight over there?
What if it stands to sell more pay-per-view buys and you can put asses in that many more seats having it over there as opposed to having it over here? You wouldn't go? You wouldn't want to?
I guess not.
That wouldn't be surprising if so many foreign fighters didn't subject themselves to those same circumstances to come here and accommodate American-based fighters like Teofimo Lopez. I mean, could you imagine if Richard Comey, the then reigning IBF lightweight champion, said, "We're not going to have this fight unless we can have it in Ghana"?
I got no problem fighting in the United States.
Except if it's against you. If it's against you, I want it in my home turf. I want it in Ghana or no fight.
What does that shit sound like to you guys?
I don't know that Teofimo and Josh are ever going to fight. For all I know, maybe as Teofimo's moving up to 140, Josh Taylor will be moving out to 147. Who really knows? I mean, maybe it doesn't happen because Josh, he doesn't think Teofimo's undisputed anyway.
Told him to become undisputed feist.
I don't know if what he means by that is that Teofimo has to finish the unfinished business with Devin Haney. Teofimo did express an interest in fighting Devin Haney after this George Kambosos Jr. fight. Let's see what happens with that. Ultimately, I don't know that Lopez versus Taylor even happens, so I don't want to spend too much time on this. It's just interesting how quickly Teofimo shoots down the idea of this fight potentially happening in the United Kingdom. If you ask me, he showed his cards. The prospect of a Lopez versus Taylor fight is intriguing, though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Edging that fight. How would it break down? Both of these guys are undisputed to some degree, considered as such in some circles. What would the fight look like? And I can only tell you now what I told you before, as I've no cause, no reason to believe otherwise. Teofimo Lopez is of generous proportions as far as lightweights go. Very strong puncher at 135 pounds. And for what it's worth, I actually think that power will carry to 140, some of it. Though I don't think he will be quite as devastating a puncher against genuine 140-pounders as he is to 135-pounders. I don't. Thinking about a Taylor versus Lopez fight, Josh Taylor's a guy who's been in there with naturally bigger guys than Teofimo. Strong, aggressive punchers like Ivan Baranchik and Regis Prograrius, educated boxers in Victor Pistol. He's coming off a career best win over the then unbeaten unified champion Jose Ramirez, another guy who, like himself, is statuesque for the weight, very generous proportions, very durable. A lot of other guys wouldn't have survived those two knockdowns that Jose survived. These are the experiences that Josh Taylor brings to the table. Now, Teofimo Lopez's resume ain't nothing to sneeze at. For what it's worth, the kid's got a solid resume in less than 20 fights. But what are we really talking about here? A knockout over Richard Comey, excellent knockout, highlight reel worthy. Richard's a strong puncher at 135. At 140, I'd wager that there are even bigger punchers than Richard that Teofimo would have to contend
A
with.
decision over Vasyl Lomachenko.
And I'm not making excuses for Vasyl Lomachenko's loss. I'm not going to do that. But what I will say is that Vasyl Lomachenko isn't a natural lightweight, that he's on the smaller end of the spectrum as far as lightweights go. These are the career best wins for Teofimo Lopez, and these are not victories that communicate to me, at least not yet, that he can contend with someone that has the size, the power, and the skill of a Josh Taylor. I have no reason to believe that Josh can't just crowd Teofimo Lopez and bully him around because he's the naturally bigger guy. The aesthetic I see for this fight, at least right now, until Teofimo gives me reason to believe otherwise, the aesthetic I see is the same aesthetic as the Regis Prograrius versus Josh Taylor fight, because Regis, like Teofimo, slick boxer, likes to roll punches off the shoulder, work off the counter, strong punchers, the both of them, at their prescribed weights, with the difference being that Regis is a naturally bigger guy than Teofimo.
Josh was able to take his power.
Crowd him, get inside on him, do the business deep in the pocket. He was able to do that to Regis, who's a naturally bigger guy than Teofimo. So with Teofimo, I see a very similar situation, except it's with a smaller guy.
I got every reason to believe Taylor wins that fight.
Until further notice, until Teofimo gives me a reason to believe otherwise. And that hasn't happened yet. I'm leaving the door open for more considerations, but here today, Taylor gets the edge.
Josh Taylor's the logical choice in that situation.
At least until further notice. And who knows if this is even a conversation that's worth having, because for all we know, the fight don't materialize. The fight might not happen.
It's not like it's set in stone or anything.
Maybe Taylor fights Catterall next and Crawford afterwards.
Could all be much ado about nothing.